Hello out there, all of my fellow believers in Yeshua. This is one of the watchmen from Following Yeshua Ministries at www.followingjesuschurch.com. Now, today I wanted to let a lot of you know about a significant date coming up where there's a multitude of signs pointing to this one date. Now, the day is pointing towards the day of the Lord. Now, what is the day of the Lord, you're asking? Well, Yahweh's words make it clear to us that this will begin as a time of punishment for rebellious humans. And you can see this in Isaiah chapter 34, verse 8. Now, the reason I'm telling you where you can see these things at is because as we were told, we're supposed to test certain things and test everything, test the spirits, test the truth, test just the belief in everything. And not supposed to just take somebody's word on this thing. We're supposed to test everything and make sure that it lines up with what is said out there, wanting to show you proof of these things. So throughout this teaching, you will hear me tell you about certain places where you could check out certain things and certain scriptures throughout the Bible. Now, with the multitude of these signs pointing to one date, which we will tell you about later on in this lesson teaching, but I wanted to start off with telling you about the shmita. For those of you who do not know what the shmita is, well, the shmita is the Hebrew word for sabbatical. And as you could see with Jonathan Cahn, you should definitely check out his books. And you can see him at Jonathan, and that's Cahn, C-A-H-N. He's done a lot of research and done a lot of supporting for the background and foundation of finding out where the shmita and what the situations to get a closer, to pinpoint it to the accuracy from the Babylon times. Now, well, like Yahweh said, on the seventh day we rest. Well, with the seventh shmita, on the seventh year we rest. And that is a shmita. Understand that Israel was a very heavy agricultural society. See, you were not allowed to plant, harvest, no weeding, no pruning, and no buying and selling from the land. The land was to truly rest. And what had happened was Israel didn't listen. So in 586 BC, Yahweh will get his. And he made them rest for 70 years in 586 BC, when he let Babylon come in and take them back to Babylon for how many years? 70 years, which Daniel prophesied. But remember now that Daniel knew about the 70 years, and he counted all of the 70 years. But on his 70th birthday, nothing happened. And it wasn't till a few weeks later that it happened. So what I'm saying is that things could happen before or after. Now, what puts it all in amazement is how you see it affects us today. Now, after the Twin Towers got hit, understand that that was a Shemitah year as well. So now, the Shemitah can be a restoration or breaking down, depending on where you are at with Yahweh. Now, in 2001, the stock market took its biggest plummet ever, and it crashed 7%, which was a judgment. Now, a lot of things will tie in with this, and with the number 7 to say. So we see that the number 7 is a signature number that Yahweh uses. And 7 years later, down to the date, on the same exact day and the hour, the stock market takes its biggest dump ever. But now it's even larger. And now, for some reason, for 6 years, the stocks start to climb. But then, on the 7th, they fall again. Now, on this Shemitah year in 2008, 7 years later, it fell again. But this time, it wasn't just to 7 points. It was to 777 points. Now see, there's that 7 again. 3 sevens in fact. So now, this has everyone looking to the next Shemitah year, which is September of 2015. the Feast of Trumpets. But we are also looking at the 23rd of September 2015, which is the Day of Atonement, the year of the Jubilee. Now, why those 2 days, you ask? Well, let's talk about the 7-year tribulation, because that is the time of Jacob's trouble. Now, what was it? Now, here's the story of Jacob. Now, as he arrived in Haran, Jacob saw a well where the shepherds were gathering their flocks to water them, and he met Laban's younger daughter, Rachel, Jacob's first cousin. Now, she was working as a shepherdess, and he loved her immediately. And after spending a month with his relatives, he asked for her hand in marriage in return for working 7 years for Laban. But when these 7 years were completed and he asked for his wife, Laban had deceived Jacob by switching Rachel's older sister Leah as the veiled bride. Now in the morning when the truth became known, Laban justified his actions, saying that in his country it was unheard of to give a younger daughter before the older. However, he agreed to give Rachel in marriage as well if Jacob would work another 7 years. Now there it is, 2 sevens, right? So after the week of the wedding celebrations with Leah, Jacob went and he married Rachel, and he continued to work for Laban for another 7 years. Now at this point he had about a dozen kids and a few wives. So here comes another 7 for you, the third 7. So Laban was reluctant to release Jacob. So Jacob then made a deal to take all of the few spotted goats that Laban had, which Yahweh blessed Jacob with, and gave him more than that of the solid flock, which Laban then got upset at and wanted to trade back, and went ahead and traded back, accepting the spotted flocks with Jacob. But now Yahweh made the solid flock blessed more for Jacob and more abundant. Now, as time passed, Laban's sons noticed that Jacob was taking a better part of their flocks. And so Laban's friendly attitude towards Jacob began to change. And Yahweh told Jacob that he should leave, which he and his wives and his children did without informing Laban about it. Now, before they left, Rachel stole the teraphim, considered to be a household idol, from Laban's house. So in a rage, Laban pursued Jacob for 7 days. So now we see that the 7-year tribulation is the time of Jacob's trouble. Now every 7 shmitas, when you have 7 shmitas, that's 7 times 7, which equals 49. Then the following year is called a Jubilee year. That is a year when all debts were canceled. So it was basically like a celebration year, like a whoopee. Now, we can never pinpoint the Shemitah years, but with Jonathan Cahn's discoveries, now we can. So the 50th year is a Jubilee year. But now, going back 2 Jubilees in 1917 with World War I, at this time the Ottoman Empire was in power for 400 years. The Muslim dynasty. Now, General Allenby from the British had decided to go into Israel to redeem them. So what he had done is he flew overhead and passed out a bunch of flyers from an airplane saying General Allenby is going to be marching with his army. Now the Turks misread it. They misread what it said, and they thought it said Allah Nabi, which means Allah's prophets of judgment. So they just sat down their weapons, and all of the men ran away. Now the general and the British went in and took it without fire. Now they were very favorable to the Jewish people. For the first time in 400 years, now you have a nation in charge. And that was the start of a restoration period for Israel. Now before the next Jubilee happened, they had become a state. And the British then walked away and they became their own nation, Israel. And 19 years after that was the next Jubilee. And that was 1967. with the 6-day war. Now, when they gained Israel as the capital again for the first time in 2,000 years, they were able to walk on the Temple Mount once again. Now, in 1945, this was also a shmita year, and the U.S. became a superpower for the first time. Now, all the other nations have fallen because it was a time of judgment for them for turning away from Yahweh. But now, 4 shmitas later, in 1973, because of America's acting, the shmita then became a judgment on America. And that was U.S., the United States, losing the Vietnam War. And why? Because they had legalized abortion at this time. And guess what? It's continued to be a judgment since then, because we took prayer out of school. Now we have same-sex marriage, and we've done so much more. Look at American Idol, for instance. We're supposed to be idolizing these people, and we all know what the commandments of Yahweh said, not to do that. So Adonai help us. Now in Genesis chapter 1 verse 14, it says, the sun and the stars and the lights in the sky, use them as signs. Now I will show you how all of these signs point to one specific day. Now in Joel chapter 2 verse 30 to 31, it says, and I will show you wonders in the heavens and in the earth, blood and fire and pillars of smoke. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord. And with the signs of the solar eclipse, it is usually a warning to America. And now, with the blood moon, it is normally a warning to Israel. Now, with the warnings in Joel chapter 2:30 through 31 of the blood moon and the solar eclipse, as of 3/20/2015, there will have been a solar eclipse, which is a judgment towards America. And as of 4/4/2015, on Passover, there will have been a blood moon, which is a judgment to Israel. And both these events tie in with Joel chapter 2:30 verse 31. So as we have seen, the sun will have been turned into darkness on 3/20/2015 with the solar eclipse, and the moon into blood on 4/4/15 with the blood moon. And what follows is 9/13/2015, the Feast of Trumpets, which is the preparation for the coming of Yeshua. Now on 9/23/2015, the first day of the 7th month, number 7 again, it is the Day of Atonement in the 50th year, the year of the Jubilee. Now, Yeshua's gift of atonement on the day of judgment, and this is why we need a lot of Christians out there, you guys don't understand that these days that we have out there are just a lot of pagan days, these Christmas days, these New Year's days, these Thanksgiving days, these Easter days. These are not of Yahweh. These are not of Yeshua. And that is why we need to understand about his true holy days, which you could read of, as in Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 23. Those are the days we're supposed to know and understand. That's the days that Yahweh goes on. Those are his appointed days that we're supposed to keep. Not these pagan days that we celebrate. We don't want to do these things because this is not good to Yahweh. We can't come to Yahweh and say, Yahweh, remember me? Remember I celebrated your birthday. Remember I celebrated these things, because he told us clearly that these were not his days. He told us not to be tricked and not to do as they do. He told us to study his word and understand the truth. So we had all the opportunity. It was on us to take this and run with it. But now, as in Leviticus chapter 16, verse 29, it is called the Sabbath of all Sabbaths, and the day upon which one must afflict one's soul. This is the Day of Atonement. And on this day, forgiveness of sins is asked of Yahweh. It is the holiest day of the Jewish year. So imagine this. You aren't practicing and observing his true holy feast days. So now, each year that comes, you're not asking for forgiveness of your sins. So all these sins that you've accumulated, you could say, I've been born again, all of this, but he told us how to do these things and what days to follow and how to get a cleansed soul. Remember that. Check it out, Leviticus chapter 23. These are the days. Now, this day gives us insight to the final judgment of the world, the Day of Atonement. Now, back to why the dates of 9/13/2015 on Rosh Hashanah till 10 days later on the Day of Atonement, 9/23/2015, is so important. Well, on Rosh Hashanah, the destiny of the righteous are written into the book of life, and the wicked are put into the book of death. However, most people will not be put into either book. But we have 10 days until Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, 9/23, to repent before the sealing of our fate. And now, in Revelation 6:12, with the sixth seal, we see, and I will read as follows. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every other mountain and island were moved out of their places. So now, Isaac Newton, the scientist who discovered gravity, well, it was recently discovered that, and this is all kept at the Vatican, that his last years, that there were more notebooks written by him on the second coming of Yeshua than he ever wrote on math or science. Now, he also learned to speak ancient Hebrew. And I'm not talking about the restored Hebrew that is used in Israel today. But understand, he said that it was the Yahweh language. And he believes it was the language that Yeshua spoke into existence of the universe. Now, he said that whenever he would walk through the woods, speaking this Hebrew, that all the plants would start growing a brighter green, and the grass and the leaves would as well. And that whenever he would cease speaking it, they would go back to their normal colors. But now, in Genesis chapter 6, verse 3, Yahweh told Noah that he gave man 6,000 years and 120 years, as he said it. Or else 120 Jubilee years is what he was saying. Now, understand that the Jubilee year is every 50th year. So when he said 120 and he uses his Jubilee years, he was saying 120 times 50. And 120 times 50 comes to 6,000. Now he told Noah that he would not always strive with man, and that it is only allowed 120 years, which are the Jubilee years. And this, coming up, is the 120th Jubilee year for man. On September 23rd, 2015, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And it will be the anniversary of the 6,000th year that Adam was created. From that day on, the Day of Atonement. Again, well, Daniel talks about the 69 years, and we are waiting for the 70th year, which is the tribulation. Now, guess what? It's been 69 years since they became a nation. And on September 23rd, 2015, it will become the 70th year. Now, the Six-Day War of June 7th, 1967, it was a Jubilee year. Now, you could count that forwards 17,640 days to the date. It is September 23rd, 2015. I also want to note that on 9/24/2015, it is the most significant Muslim holiday. Also from 9/27/2015, during that week, Pope Francis will visit Philadelphia, home of the Liberty Bell. And I also want to show you one more thing. I don't know if you guys seen this, but here's another sign. The French foreign minister, along with John Kerry, warned us of 500 days until climatic chaos. Judge for yourself.
We have 500 days to avoid the climate chaos. Very important issue of climate change, climate chaos, and I said that we had 500 days to avoid the climate chaos, and I know that President Obama and John Kerry himself are committed on this subject, and I'm sure that with them, with a lot of other friends, we shall be able to reach a success in this very important matter.